Now the top of the hour, and I'd like to welcome everybody for coming on in. We'll still have a few. We got Mark Hart up there. He's our chief cook, bottle washer, dishwasher, tech guru extraordinaire who puts all these sessions up on the screen, up on sorts of the chat rooms out, and puts everything up on the OC Callers website, as well as everything. Thanks everybody for coming in. We've got Betsy. Betsy, can you give us a wave so everybody knows where you're at there? Betsy is back with us again to talk on a topic that ideally, if we could, we'd probably schedule about 300 one-hour sessions, and then we'd just be starting to cover one of the base foundation principles of calling, which is programming. Now, Betsy is North Brunswick, New Jersey, is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, North Brunswick, New Jersey, and calling since 1962. So going on, oh my goodness, that's going to be 60 years coming up for you, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah.
All programs from
Maybe
contra
I'll get it right
dancing.
soon.
Yeah, contra dancing through C3. She is an accredited Caller Lab coach. Been a Caller Lab coach for just over 30 years now. In addition to her regular programming, her and her husband Roy travel through the States, Canada, England. We've even had them over here in Australia for caller schools, festivals, weekend engagements. Betsy is a former vice chair of Caller Lab, 10 years on the board of governors, multiple terms on the executive committee. There's about 30 pages of qualifications and recognitions and everything else. So I'm not going to go through that because that would take up the entire session.
Yep, I could get out of work.
But suffice it to say, it's over 15 years ago, she received the highest award from Caller Lab. That's the Milestone Award. And she's been deserving of many since, but there's basically nothing left to give her. She's here today, as I said, to talk about a topic that needs at least 300 sessions to even start covering it properly. That is programming. But it sets the surrounds for the success as a caller, and it's as important as choreography, delivery skills, music, and all that other kind of stuff that goes into making a caller. So I'm going to pass this over to Betsy. Betsy, welcome, and thank you for coming back.
Thank you, Mel. All right, so programming is an important thing. You can't, people say, oh yeah, I just get up and call, and that's they are fooling themselves, says she politely. So, here we go. Share. And up we come. That's not what I want. That's what I want. All right, so programming, planning for dancer comfort and enjoyment. Because one of the most important things that we have to do is please the dancers and make them happy. Otherwise, they vote with their feet. You see their heels as they walk out the door. So if we don't have a plan and things start going wrong, we're in trouble. Even those of us with lots of years of experience need to plan ahead. So programming can and should be applied to a sequence, a tip or bracket, and or a dance. It's applied to each one of those in turn. Now, calling is communicating with the dancers, and Mike Jacobs used to say that each sequence was like a sentence, and each tip or bracket is like a paragraph, and the dance tells the story. Now, back when I was in high school, I had a very excellent English teacher who set me up to go to college and write themes and thesis papers and things like that with her organization. And the first thing she had us do every time was do an outline. And the programming is the outline that helps the caller focus so the story makes sense. And besides an outline, she used to have us state a controlling idea. What is the thing you want to do with these dancers? What do you want to communicate? Are you doing some sort of workshop that you want to teach certain calls? Are you trying to bring people up to a higher degree of comfort? And what is your goal? So programming should be applied to both choreography and music, and the caller needs to build for a difficult sequence so the dancers succeed. Music should change from smooth and easy to exciting with peaks and valleys built in. If you were here for Tony Tony O's discussion on the singing calls, he talked about how he builds up, and he has his music rated by 4, 3, 2, 1. I do not have that. I just have to me, I have a sense of what I wanted to follow what, but I couldn't tell you this would be in my case 4 or whatever. But it's important to have a sense of where you want to go with the music. So let's talk about planning for a special sequence, a fancy piece of choreography. This is important if you have a special piece of choreography where you want the dancers to succeed and enjoy your special combination. And I will go right to the bottom of the page because you will hear me say this more than once throughout this presentation. Special choreography is impressive only if the dancers succeed. If you have this great get out and they don't succeed, it's not a great get out. You have failed. So first thing you need to do to build up to the special choreography is analyze the special choreography for the hard places. Now, newer callers may or may not have a sense of what the dancers find hard. And if you're calling it in your own area, you have a different sense of what the dancers find difficult than if you're calling someplace else. And you have to kind of feel out the floor. We had a couple of sessions on Caller Lab for a while called sussing the floor, where you what would you call in the first tip to get a sense of what the dancers find difficult and what the dancers find comfortable, and you would experiment with certain calls. I myself, when I'm calling out of my area, I basically calling a mainstream tip, I would call what I consider the calls that are lesser used and see how the dancers at this place react to those. Now they may not be lesser used in this area, and that'll give me a sense of what the dancers are used to. So now if you're a newer caller and you're not sure why the dancers may find a specific combination of calls difficult, consult with somebody, a more experienced caller, or even a dancer friend. If you have a friend who has danced for a long time and is a sophisticated dancer, they may be able to tell you why other dancers might find this difficult, whereas you're going, well, it just flowed well and I don't understand why. But you need to have a sense of that. I cannot tell you how long I taught classes before I understood why bend the line was difficult. And to me, the analysis of why bend the line is difficult is that it was the first call that I was running into in the teaching order where you had to decide on your position within the square, end or center, and then apply which way you had to go. It was the first call where you had to recognize your specific position to do the call. And since the ends and centers do different things in bend the line, it made it more difficult for a lot of people. Then, if you're going to build this up, call one or more sequences that use calls that will be featured in the special choreography from the standard arrangements. This is done beforehand. Create some modules that say, okay, so say you're going to feature centers in. You're going to feature the call centers in and use it in some ways that may not be standard for your group. Write some modules that use the standard arrangements and setups for centers in. Double pass through, centers in, cast off 3/4 comes to mind as what I consider a calling cliche. It's something that's called all the time, at least in my area. So create some modules and you'll be prepared to work through this. Now, depending on how difficult people find using the material that you've prepared, it may take you a whole tip or bracket to get to the special piece of choreography. It may take you 2 or 3 tips or brackets so that you've built up to this before the end of the evening. If the dancers cannot complete the calls involved in the sequence from a standard arrangement, you may have to use them repeatedly to help the dancers to dance the calls more easily. So maybe they're newer dancers and they haven't done a lot of different things with the call centers in. It's always centers in, cast off, 3/4. So work with them with centers in and centers do something else. The next step would be to try to use the featured call in a more unusual arrangement. Be careful about causing the dancers to fail. Uh, if you for example set up an 8-chain through position, so you had, say, the girls in the center and the boys on the outside, you could do a facing centers in and then have the girls run and immediately be closer to the standard uh, than after anything else. But you have a strategy. This is why you are doing your preparation. And special choreography is impressive only if the dancers succeed. Now, that covers that for now. There's a lot more we could say on it, but the answer is prepare, prepare, prepare. And I have planning for a special tip or bracket, and there are going to be 3 sections on this. Number 1 is, in our area, we have what we call class dances. The Northern New Jersey Association sponsors a dance in January for people who are in lessons. The Callers Association sponsors a dance in February for people who are in lessons. All of those who are teaching lessons get a chance to sign up and call for 1 tip during these dances. And we have to prepare because we have a whole bunch of brand new people on the floor, and they're really scared and they're going to possibly fail. So you have a guest tip or bracket or a tip or bracket as part of a multiple caller dance. What is your plan? Understand that the dancers will find fancy choreography exciting only if they succeed. If this tip or bracket is for newer dancers, such as a special dance for class members, as I just mentioned, start easy. You need to build the dancer's confidence in you and your calling. Circle left, Alaman left, right and left grand, promenade home may seem way too simple, but then they're scared to death and they're unfamiliar with your voice. Anytime you're calling for people that you don't normally call for, give them an easy cliche sequence or 2 so that they get used to your voice and get used to your delivery. If they have confidence in you, then you as a caller will be able to deliver with confidence calls that might scare them otherwise, and they'll trust in you to do the call. And that's why an experienced caller, a lot of times, they may call some piece of fancy choreography, and the newer caller looks at them and says, I just called the same thing and nobody did it. Why? It's because the experienced caller has built up the confidence and projects the confidence, and the dancers will believe in them. So you have to work on that. Keep the sequences short so that dancers can get back into the dancing. Sometimes newer dancers aren't really experienced to make lines of 4, even though we should and do teach it. So they square up and then they can't get back in because you've got this long piece of choreography going on. You may want to plan for standard lines in your sequence so that if some squares break down, they can quickly get back into dancing. And when I say standard lines, I mean, quote, normal lines. I stopped using the term normal a while ago because everybody in square dancing laughed at me when I said we got normal lines. They insisted they weren't. It's a good plan to use the figure from your singing call in the pattern. Back in the 60s, they used to walk through the singing call sometimes if it was difficult. So if you use it in the pattern and the dancers can get used to it, and you give an extra beat for recovery, then they'll be able to succeed when you use it in the singing call. Analyze the singing call figure for calls that you can eliminate in case the dancers fall behind. Say there's a square through 4 and a do-si-do to a wave. You can say just step to a wave and continue the call if you need to add those extra beats in. If the singing call figure is closely timed, you may want to have an alternate singing call figure to substitute. And in order to do that, you have to practice. And you have to consider this before you get to the dance. Okay, second part of this, planning for a tip or a bracket within a multiple caller dance. Pick one of your best singing calls, but have more than one prepared in case one of the other callers uses your song. Now, on Zoom recently, when we've had multiple caller dances, we've filled out a spreadsheet and everybody has listed their music so that we don't plan to do a specific singing call only to find that somebody else has chosen it and done it just before us. I can remember when we were back on records, uh, how at the national convention, when you had a 5 minute spot in the US, you had a 5 minute spot. So a lot of people just did singing calls, and they would go into the one room or another room with just the singing call they were going to call. What happens if the guy ahead of you uses that singing call? And using using hearing the same singing call, no matter how good it is, 3 or 4 times in 1 hour is 3 or 4 times too many. And these people were caught up short because somebody ahead of them used their particular music. Nowadays, I would have more than one tune, one singing call up and on a playlist. So if the one I was going to use did not seem suitable, I had an alternate without having to search through my screens. I like to try to have a singing call that's in contrast with the caller before me. So if they used country songs, I might use a pop song or a rock and roll tune or some sort of old standard from the 40s, just to build the peaks and valleys into the festival or special dance. At the U.S. National, when a they have the live music hall, a lot of times we go up and up and up and up because nobody wants to back off, and the band is playing and everybody's having a great time, and all of a sudden the folks just get exhausted because we've just been pushing and pushing and pushing, and there's no peaks and valleys. Now, during one of these tips here at home, or dances here at home, sometimes there's a chance at the end for an extra tip or bracket. So say we had 6 callers or 7 callers on the program, and we get through all the 7 callers and there's still time left. They may come to callers who are on the program and say, do you two want to work together? Well, it may be something exciting for people, but duets can be dangerous. It's best to rehearse before the dance. If a chance to work with another caller happens, plan so that you can succeed or wait for a future opportunity. If you're the newer caller, ask the more experienced caller to use a music selection from your list, because the experienced caller should be more able to be flexible. If they are not willing or able to use a singing call from your music and you're not comfortable with any of their selections, gracefully bow out. Especially when you're new, the dancers will remember a poor performance and it may haunt you for part of your career. I had somebody that I was recommending for a square dance teaching position 10 years ago now. And somebody said to me in the club, but I heard her call, and it was 8 years before that, and she didn't do such a good job. I said, it's been 8 years. She's gotten better. But they had that particular performance in mind, and it was held against her. If you're the more experienced caller working with a newer caller, choose a singing call that you know from their music selections. It will build their confidence and make them feel strong. If you're the more experienced caller working with somebody new, always try and make sure that they are going to succeed. You will look good if both of you succeed. You will not look good if you show off and leave them in the dust. So that's part of the plan. Be ready with your choice of media. Make sure your laptop, phone, or tablet is booted up and the battery charged. You don't want the battery to die in the middle. Have your selection and alternates ready to play. Check the hookup and have the correct chords ready. Sometimes at these multiple dances, whoever's setting up the sound may just have a connecting cord already in the amplifier. which makes it so much easier to change. But check for that. If they don't have that set up, check what sort of plug you're going to need to use and get it ready. Have a bag of every possible connections that you can have that you can use in the world. All right. And third section on planning for a tip or bracket, choreography. We talked about the music, but during this same dances, watch the squares to see what calls give trouble to the floor. Avoid those calls if you can. If you're on first, keep it simple and add more complexity. Basically, start off with what I call the calling cliches and then change it. Build your modules. Stick to memory or module choreography. This is not the time to practice your sight resolution. Uh, if you have to use sight resolution, write down more than one square, even if your square has all your trusted friends in it. And I might actually add, especially if your sight square has all your trusted friends in it, because they may not be so trustworthy. The people in the squares do not understand how important it is for the dancers to be in the right place for you to be able to do your job and resolve the square if you're using sight resolution. So you'll write them down and then they'll cheerfully change to play a trick on you. Well, guess who looks bad? It isn't the square in front of you. It's you, because you didn't have a plan and you didn't plan ahead. So be aware. Again, work your singing call sequence into the pattern. Fancy choreography will only impress the dancers if the dancers succeed. Moving right along. Planning for a dance. Check the club website to see if there's a theme. Telephone your contact if there's no info or no website. A lot of times they may have picked themes and for some reason the dancers don't often think that the caller might want to prepare for their theme in advance. So they don't let you know until you show up. If you're calling for your own club, that's not a problem. But if you're hired as a guest caller for some other group, it's important if they have a theme for you to be able to prepare for it, because they will appreciate that. But if you haven't gotten that in advance, I mean, I have looked up themes and gone down. Now I've been calling for 50 whatever years, and I have gone down into the basement and into the file cabinets and dug out a record and recorded it onto my computer because it fit their theme, and I didn't have a lot of other music that would fit their theme. And it was something that I did 30 years ago, but I can revive it if I know in advance, and I can plan it, and I can program and use it. Now I would use that, since it might be rusty, I'd probably use it somewhere in the middle of the dance, because if you use something in the middle of the dance and it's not your best calling job, you have two or three or four more tips or brackets to do your best and let them forget about that. So if you're using something new, you might want to put it in the middle. Plan for that so that if something happens and it doesn't sound the best, you can come off sounding great at the end, because that's what they'll remember. If you've called for the group before, check your records, and of course you keep records, to prevent a total duplication of the music used especially for holiday events. Sometimes I'm calling for a club once or twice a year. So I may be pulling music for a playlist, and I'll say, well, I haven't used this in a long time. Well, guess what? I used it a year ago at that dance. So check, and if you're calling for holiday events, there are only so many pieces of some of the holiday music. So you may want to put it in a different order. You may want to skip one, just so that you don't call the exact same dance every year for the group. Look through your music selections and for music that would fit the theme, both patter and singing calls. I have a personal strategy. I like to kind of match what I consider the style of the pattern music and the singing call music. Other people deliberately contrast it. What do I mean by matching it? If I'm using a country sort of tune for my singing call, it's probably going to be a country sort of music for my patter. If I'm using something more modern for the singing call, then I'm going to use a pop tune for the patter. That's my style. But there's nothing that says if it's your choice that you can't choose a pop music for the patter and something country for the singing call. It's what you want. Just have a plan. If there's no scheduled theme, you can create one if desired. For example, sing about the weather, Beatles music, seasons, Broadway. I personally have a superstition that goes back to when I was a child and I went to a dance week with my parents. It was a week where they did international folk dancing, square dancing, contra dancing, round dancing, and anything else that was anywhere related to this. And we're at a campgrounds. And the first night they did an Israeli folk dance called Mayim, which means water. It rained the rest of the week. I do not use songs about rain unless either we have a drought or it's already raining. That is my particular superstition, because if we have great weather, I don't want to jinx it. But pick a theme if you want. Plan your music to build the peaks and valleys of excitement. As I think I said before, I like to pull and save a playlist prior to leaving the house. If something changes, I can easily change one selection or change the music order or insert a different choice. But what I found was when I was pulling my music in advance, just before the dance at the dance hall, people wanted to talk to me. They wanted to say something. They wanted a century book signed. They wanted my attention. So I find it's best for me to have the plan in advance before I leave the house. I save the playlist, and that way, if my computer does something wacko, I can call up the same playlist instantly because it was saved as what usually I save it as today, and today gets periodically replaced every time I call. But save the dance, and then you can call it up immediately in case you had to reboot for some reason. Be prepared for events that will interrupt your planned flow of the dance. For example, just prior to the dance, somebody gets up and says, "Oh, we welcome you to this dance, and we want to say we are so sorry we heard about Joe Smith's passing away, and let's send our condolences to Mabel Smith." Now start the dance, Betsy. Well, maybe what I picked for the first singing call is not going to be appropriate. So you got to be prepared because they don't have any idea how that announcement will affect the dancers. Another possibility, during the dance, someone falls and has to go to the hospital. And then they make a decision to continue the dance after the EMTs are gone and the ambulance has gone away. What do you use to start it up again? It's like starting over again, but you don't want to be too happy about it because you have sympathy for this poor person who was injured. So have some ideas in mind of what you might do if something like this happens at a dance you're calling. Planning for a class. Create an overall lesson plan. Be prepared to revise it. The question I'm sure will come to mind, do you publish this lesson plan? And my answer was for a while, especially for beginners, no. But then working with people, I found that there are certain people who learn better by reading ahead. They want to know what's projected. And if you say, well, things didn't happen the way we planned it, so the next week's lesson plan is going to be revised, they will accept that. But they want to be able to study in advance. I usually have a published lesson plan. A couple of clubs I work for put it on their website so people can consult. If I revise it, then I immediately send it to the webmaster and they get it up on the website with the announcement that it's been revised. Check the new list. Analyze the calls to be taught to determine which are more complex. Ken was talking about teachable moments and how many to teach. It's also you have a suggested teaching order, but there are also maybe 3 calls in a row are what you consider more complex calls. You don't necessarily want to schedule them on the same night. So you may want to pick something that's really easy to get that complex and simpler calls in combination so that the dancers can work with it. Decide what call should be taught first in the evening so they can be used to introduce other calls or earlier in the lesson plan. For example, if you look at the traditional Color Lab teaching order for a while, the arm turn trades happened after swing through. But I think if I teach the arm turn trades before swing through, then I can more easily teach swing through. So I always flip that order. And if you have a plan as to why this particular change is good, you can explain it to people, and it creates the teachable moments that Ken was talking about. Each call should be called more than once every single class night. Keep checkoff sheets and then check to see what's been neglected. Now, during my regular lessons, I will take you take a break. I don't take a big long break, but I take a break and I'll mark on the checkoff sheets which calls I used. And then I'll look and see if there's any that I've been neglecting. I'll jot down on a piece of paper, I need to use, I need to use Ferris wheel. I need to use touch a quarter. I need to use single file circulate. And the call I'm going to teach is blah, blah, blah. The call I'm going to teach is fold. I just pick those out of random. But I'll set goals. I'll set goals for the class night before I go with the teaching order, and I'll say, now calls I neglected recently are these. I need to use these in the first introductory tip. And I work a lot like Ken said he did. I'll start off with an introductory tip where they're just dancing stuff that they've known for up to 3 weeks ago. But I'll make sure that any calls that I haven't used in a couple weeks get put into that tip, so if I need to, I can review them again. Okay. So I'll set goals for every tip and bracket about which calls to use and what will be taught. I don't always succeed in these goals, but at least I have a plan. Be careful with your music selection. If you're teaching and you use some really razzle-dazzle sort of music, guess what? You've lost their attention. They're so busy having a great time with this wonderful piece of music that they don't necessarily assimilate what you're trying to teach. Set a playlist prior to the lesson, and I have been known to say, and I will say it over again, that the dancers in the lessons that I teach in the body of the lessons may not get my most exciting and best music, because I want them to concentrate on what they're learning. In the opening tip and the closing, that's when they're going to get the really good music and get to live it up and practice. When I'm teaching, I believe in separating what I call the cliche combinations when teaching the component calls. It always used to be lead right, circle to a line. It was like it was all one word. Swing through and the boys run, all one word. Now lead right has graduated to lead right and veer left because we were getting away from circle to a line. Centers in is always followed by cast off 3/4. Doesn't have to be, but a lot of times it is. So find what you consider the cliche combinations and teach them on different weeks so that the dancers get a good chance to separate out where one call starts and ends and where the next call starts and ends, so that when you put them together, they'll understand the combination. I truly believe that there are dancers, excuse me, especially here in the States, who do not know where the call follow your neighbor ends. They've never heard it without and spread afterwards. And it's not their fault. So plan for the class. Okay. that is everything that I have. Stop share. I know there's a lot more I could talk, but I'm sure there's a whole bunch of questions that we've got so that we can discuss things.
Oh, thanks, Betsy. That's an outline table of context for the next 20 presentations on programming, because each one of those is worthy of its own session.
Yes.
I do have a few questions that have come up. Some of them are, I'm not sure if they're questions or comments, but I'm going to go through them just in the interest of fairness. The first one was, how much time should be spent on programming?
For what?
That was just a question. I'm assuming they're talking about programming in the dance, but you went into that. That was a question that sort of came up right at the beginning.
Okay.
You've gone through it. So it's, I would say programming a tip, a sequence, a dance, a theme, whatever.
I would say if I'm programming, let's start, we finished with lessons. Let's start with lessons. I would take, it's going to take several hours to do the overall lesson plan. For each particular lesson, I've got a lot of experience, so I might only need about a half an hour to go over things and jot things down. If I'm teaching, how can I explain this? Prior to the pandemic, for 2 groups, I was doing alternating brackets of advanced. In one club, it was advanced class and C1 workshop. And so every bracket was different. So it would be an advanced class, and then a C1 workshop, and then an advanced class, and then a C1 workshop. And that took a couple of hours to prepare for each time. Because what I did was I did not have any break time to check things off. So I wrote material, and then at the end of the lesson, I would go home, and that night or the next day, I would use my checkoff sheets and mark down every call from the list that I was teaching that they had used, and note down what I had not succeeded in calling that night. If I'm planning for a tip, it's going to take me probably not more than 10 minutes or so, because I have a lot of experience. As you're newer, it's going to take you longer because you're going to have to write each new module or get the thought going. So it would vary. It varies based on your experience. It varies on how much you want to do.
Our general rule of thumb I had when I was starting out was, after you've done your choreography and set and you know what you want, you've got about 2 hours of programming for every hour that you put on the floor. And that was just a rough judgment call for new callers. That's after you've done your choreography, after you've done your choice of theme and all that other stuff. The next question I got was, when you talked about special sequences, do you mean a movement or a special sequence for both?
I mean a combination, such as in the States, we do not do recycle very often without having the gentleman on the end of the wave. So a recycle to take you into a right and left grand could be a special combination for some of the mainstream groups. That would have to be, so that combination is what would have to be built up. Right. Maybe it's going to be left-handed stuff, and left-handed things would be less usual, so you'd have to plan on that. So it could be a whole sequence. It could be an exciting finish. If you're dancing to another caller and they use a great finish, you have to prepare the dancers that you're calling to be able to dance that finish, because maybe you've never done something like that, or nobody in your area has done something like that. So to me, it would be more of a combination of calls, or kind of step-by-step working on a particular call that's usually only done from a cliche. It's, like, let's pick, for example, walk and dodge. A lot of times it's boys are walking, it's a right-handed box of 4, the boys are walking, the girls are dodging, and what do you do afterwards? But you can do facing walks and walk and dodges. You can have the girls walking and the boys dodging. You can have, either gender doing either part, But if the people in your area are not familiar with that, then you need to build up so that you can use the combinations that you thought were exciting. At plus, and I cannot tell you off the top of my head what the formation and arrangement is, but I know, and I recognize it by seeing it. I know that at plus there's a diamond that is boy girl diamond. It's not the boys in the center and the girls on the points, or vice versa. Where if I call flip the diamond, some of each are doing each part, and then if I call boys run immediately after that, I'm back to a standard line, and the dancers don't have time to get scared. And that's what I mean by analyzing what you want to use. Choose what you want to do that may be different, and then understand what makes it different for the people you're calling to, and then figure out how you can make it accessible for them to succeed.
That's the perfect segue into the next question was, if you're doing one of those, how soon do you get back to normal from half sashayed or unusual positions?
As quick as possible. In least where I call most of the time.
Yeah.
The dancers in our area are used to standard. If
Yeah.
you don't give them standard, they'll help you. They'll
Yeah.
fix it. And they will put themselves back where they think they should be, even though I really didn't want them there.
Okay, there's a number of questions came up. They're branched in a bunch of categories. I've just sort of summarized them. So I'll go through the list here. The topic was, how do you plan a program when you have multiple callers? And that is a standard in bracket planning, multiple singing calls, and preparing a good calm down. So I guess that is, if you have multiple callers, do you actually prepare, you try and do your best, but do you prepare a good calm down record as part of your programming with multiple callers?
I might, yes. It depends. Part of that depends on who is planning the dance. When I have been, like, if we have the Callers Association plan the dance, and I may get to program the dance and choose who's calling where and what order, and that's some of the most important things. Uh, I would choose somebody experienced to start, and then you might want to put in a newer caller, and immediately then go to somebody more experienced, and then go back, so that you'll build in the peaks and valleys with experience. And it also, if you program several new people in a row and they for some reason have difficulty, then the dancers are not going to have a great time. So that would be part of it. um, it's
Yeah.
it would
Go
be a
ahead.
great idea to see what particular music people use in advance, but you don't always get that that ability. As I said, the dance we just did with the women in calling to celebrate International Women's Day, we put down in advance what we were going to use for music, so that no duplications were, and there were kind of peaks and valleys built in.
Yeah, I think with me on that question, I'm looking at, if you're a brand new caller, you always want to give your best performance, your best show. You've got a couple of singing calls ready, and you've well prepared. If you're an experienced caller, you've got your wow, but you've also got the good solid comfort that's going to give the dancer success, but it can actually bring the level of the floor down, because as you said earlier, you don't want to leave that floor on a high all night long, because it will crash eventually.
And the experience caller can carry off the
Yeah.
comfortable the singing call with more smoothness, and not make it feel like a letdown. They can just make it feel like, okay, here's the macaroni and cheese that everybody's been looking for, the comfort food.
Yeah. Now, this is a true new caller question. I direct this one to the experienced callers, because this is something that it was asked by a new caller, and it is something that experienced callers really need to keep in mind when they're trying to teach somebody. And the question was, Betsy, how do you plan lines forward and back to recover squares?
How do I plan it?
Yeah, I know the answer, but I'm going to let you address it.
Well, you would need to be able to Okay, you would need to have a module. If you're a newer caller, you would need to have a module that would get you to the lines. Experienced callers can get to standard lines because they know what call does what. As a newer caller, you would need to build into your modular choreography lines of 4. Bob has an opinion about this also.
I've got Bob, and then I've got Daryl with their hand raised.
Okay.
Bob Elling, you're muted. You're muted, Bob. You're still muted.
That's why you can't hear me.
Right.
Anyway, I plan up to the middles and backs to break the body flow of something, or if they have just done something that is more intricate. And the up to the middle and back can be a little mini celebration of having just got through that section. And yeah, I deliberately do up to the middles and back, but I mainly plan them as preventing body flow, overflow.
Yeah, I think the question is more along the line, and I agree with what you say. Sometimes you do plan them specifically.
Oh shoot!
But also if you're writing modules, even if you've got line modules, but if you do have partner lines or standard lines somewhere, just make a note of it. It can either be like a red in bracket, so that if it is there, you're watching the floor. If there is a breakdown, you can use any of those standard lines and say up to the middle and back, pick up the floor where you are. Daryl Clendenin, you had a comment on this.
I don't know why, but I kind of assumed that being how this was a newer caller, they might be saying, well, that square broke down. How are we going to get it going again? Yeah. I've never been a big one on getting them into lines and tell them get into lines. It's up to them. You don't put them in lines. They have to do it on their own. I just always felt that it was more my responsibility to be able to get back to an Alaman left that quick to where they're not standing very long. The idea of making lines just so I can keep on calling, knowing that at the end of it, chances of there being a true Alaman left for them doesn't sit with me particularly. I like to have them get back, get home. I'll get to an Alaman left quick enough, get them dancing again. Then at the end of the thing, they've got their Alaman left, they've won, they've succeeded. They already knew that they failed once. Get them away from it.
Valid point. Betsy, is it?
Mark, oh, sorry, Mark has his hand up.
Sorry, Mark, missed that.
I'm a new caller, and I think I might know what the other person was referring to. You're calling it a guest tip or whatever, and you got your stuff kind of figured out, but you've got one square on the floor that's just not keeping up, and you want to. How would you plan where to put that up to the middle and back so that other square can catch up, so you can keep everybody going? I think that might be the original intent behind the question.
Ed Trevor put it in the comment about programming longer versus shorter sequences. If you program shorter sequences, then you can do what Daryl has said and get them right back. But a lot of times now, the experienced dancers are trained to make lines, so they may cajole their squares into lines. If your choreography does not allow you to make a line, if you're writing modules, build in get outs quick. Like, all right, okay, we're here. As Mel said, you can make notes of where the lines are. You can make notes of where you can swing your partner and everybody promenade to your original home.
I've seen people when they write their modules, they'll have at the end of PL corner box, line, RBO, whatever, because they know a get out from there, which goes hand in hand with what Daryl is saying. Daryl is a master. He can just see where they are on the floor and go like that. Not all new callers can do that. So build in to your sequence. But as Betsy said, most dancers are trained now to make lines. It's something that started in the 80s. You break down, you get to a line and you wait, and the caller will call you and pick you up. So that's where we're at. Chris, you had a comment on lines.
Yeah, I was going to say that I'm in the never mind the lines camp. I just if I have a piece of choreography that's long enough, then after the tricky part, like immediately after, I'll write a separate get out right there. And so if I'm reading this, you know, do this call, do that call, do the tricky thing. The next call after the tricky thing, I can always bail out because I'll have a bailout, a short immediately resolve right there. Um, if you're sight calling, of course, you can also. I mean I normally sight call, but even still, it's handy just to know that it's, you know, pass or trade by Alaman left without even having to think about it. It's just right there, and then you can go back and you know, give people another try. The other thing I was going to say to the new caller about the square that one square that's just having a lot of trouble. Um, there's a magical power that all square dance callers have, even beginners have can use the force to this degree. The square that you're really looking at is the one that's most likely to stay up if there's going to be any question about that. So when you see some square that's really having trouble, call really to them. Watch them very carefully, use their timing, help them out, and you know, try to call something that's pretty simple. Don't go back and do the hard thing for them necessarily. Throw something in there. I mean, sort of what I'm saying is throw them a bone, but you can make it seem like that's not really what's going on. Because periodically, if those guys are having trouble, then periodically you want to make sure you're helping them out and giving them some success, you know, as the as the tip or the evening is going on. So you just look at them really. That's now your pilot square. The guys that are having trouble, that's who you're trying to get through this.
Betsy, did you have something to add to that?
I was going to say, I would also go back and Daryl had his hand up too. I would also go back if there's a square that's been attacked by the Death Star, as I call it. You know, it's like it can't succeed no matter what you do. I start calling some really simple things to try and get them to succeed on anything. And what Chris said about after the fancy choreography have a bailout, no, I if I'm building a fancy choreography, when I'm done with that piece of choreography, they get the Alaman left immediately. So they get the success. It's like, here we are, do the Alaman left, do the grand right and left, do the walk of triumph promenade. So that you get them, so they know they succeeded. Because maybe if they get all that fancy choreography and you continue calling, they will goof up on something else, and they got all the hard part and they goofed up on something simple, and they don't have the same feeling of success. So
I agree with what you're saying. You know, a lot of the stuff that I do is a challenge. So it's the tips, the sequences even may tend to be a little longer, and they might have multiple puzzles for them to get through. So therefore I've got the bailouts. But yeah, that's right. I mean, if you can get them to succeed with something cool you want to show them, then absolutely, it's a good idea right as soon as you can right after that to get them out.
yeah, Daryl had his hand up a while back.
Yes,
Yes,
Daryl.
just a couple of things I'd like to say. Well, first off, if you're a newer caller, and especially if you're reading your material, keep it short. Don't try to get these things that go on and on and on and on. That's something that the more experienced callers do that they probably shouldn't. Why do they do it? They do it because they can. That's the only reason in the world. How many Alaman lefts during a tip? You tell me. That's a quiz for you for later. But one of the best things that I heard from Betsy, and she said it slightly differently, but basically is give the dancers a chance to win before the end of a tip. which means that that's part of your programming there. I don't care if it's a tip or a dance. There's a reason why, if there's going to be a workshop, it's put in the middle of the dance, isn't it? It's so you can prepare them for the workshop, and you can take them back to having fun afterwards, and make sure that on either side of the hard stuff, everybody wins. Plan your choreography that way. You're going to keep your dancers happy.
I,
And
that goes back to something.
from my perspective, get rid of that line stuff.
Well, this a lot of what you're saying goes back to something that we talked about, I think, last week or something, which is that you got to have a plan, and like everybody, well, like all the experienced callers are saying here, my plans are very detailed. I mean, some of them I don't need to spend as much time on it because I've been doing it forever, so I kind of know it's going to be, plan number 75 with some variations or something that I do all the time. But there's a huge amount of preparation that goes into your plan. And here's the thing, you may need to change your plan. That workshop didn't go so well, you didn't really get all the way through it, whatever. You're going to have to structure that workshop and your featured choreography so that you can use it to one degree or another. Maybe not even at all. Maybe that tip will go really badly, and if that were to happen to me, I just forget that choreography. We're just not doing that tonight. I'd get away from it as quickly as I could if it really turned out to be that much of a disaster, and I would just go in a different direction, which did not include that stuff. Or maybe I would drop one little bit of it in before the end of the night, so they feel like the ones who got it were able to do something with it. But it's all about keeping the dancers confident all night long that they're succeeding, and trying to build up their confidence and keep it there and let them dance. Even if you think it's a workshopy kind of night or whatever, you just got to be prepared to bail out, change your plan or whatever as necessary.
It's funny that the one comment on lines is the one that's generating most discussion on this. I'm going to let Betsy have a word here, and then I'm just going to move to the rest of the questions, and we can come back to this topic in a minute. Betsy, go ahead.
which topic are you coming back to?
The one on lines and quick resolution, short things. There's a couple of segues that come after that, but you had a comment.
Actually, what I was gonna say was, where they were discussing in the chat about if you have majority of the squares, and I'm not going to descend to discussing numbers, but if the majority of the squares are succeeding and there's one square that's having trouble, what do you do about that square? Should you ignore it? I've actually been known to shorten the tip by a couple of minutes, just to get them out of that group and into someplace else where the torture will not continue. Because if you get them separated, you do the singing call, they might succeed on the singing call, and get them separated and go somewhere else, it would be better.
One of the comments that came out on that was also, and I think everybody's pretty much come to the same consensus, if you do a special move or a sequence or a workshop, how close to the end of your sequence do you put your feature or your special move in the singing call and in the patter? And it's generally right near or at the end of the sequence, so you've got the best chance of success. Do your fancy thing and then get out. Would that be a correct summary?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unless they didn't succeed, in which case you better give them something to win on.
Yeah. Is it still okay to do walkthroughs on singing calls, or is it better to use your figure with an out in the patter?
I would use a figure with an out in the patter. It doesn't seem to be common these days about walking through a singing call.
Okay.
That's my personal preference. Chris is waving.
Oh, hi, Chris.
Once in a blue moon, I'll walk through a singing call if it's a pattern or something that's very unusual to what they're used to. Most of the choreography we use nowadays is sort of got a certain couple of different patterns to it. If I'm doing particularly some old-timey singing call that works a little bit differently, or something like that, then I'll walk through it. But otherwise you shouldn't need to. And if you were going to use that featured call that you just workshopped, and that workshop didn't go so well for the patter, and now you're going to use it in the singer. Yeah, I just forget that. I just
Yeah.
don't use it in the singer at all.
So if your singing call has slide through 9 times to a swing and promenade, you might want to walk through it once or twice.
Yeah, I'd change the figure.
You talked about theming. You talked about choreographic theming, structure theming, theming topics, pirates, patterns, and singing calls. Is it okay to use singing calls as patter calls when theming?
I do. I use singing calls as patter calls all the time for a couple of reasons. I go back to when we were on records, and not all the records that I really wanted to use were available in a key that I could actually sing them. And if I really liked the music and it was suitable, I'd use it for patter because I wanted to call to that music.
Yeah. I use singing calls as patter quite a bit as well. Have you got examples of negative event or negative incident songs you would use? I think that's if, yeah, let's welcome Betsy Gotti. And by the way, Joe Smith passed on. Let's all have a moment of silence for Joe. Take it away, Betsy.
I had the experience one time of calling for a club where the club caller had passed away, and they wanted to hold and its funeral was that day, and they wanted to hold the dance. I started off with Over the Rainbow. I picked my music very carefully. That would be something I would do. I would sing perhaps a love song. Yeah. Or something like that. If they've just announced that some horrible thing has happened, I would sing a love song. It would never be Hallelujah, I'm ready to go.
Probably not the best choice. Yes, Chris.
Yes, when that first came up, of course, little lists of things were running through my head about what not to do, and you know, whoever just died. Here's Chris. Yeah, don't do like Bye Bye Blackbird would not be a good opener. And then I was thinking of the time where we had somebody collapse at one of those caller association run dances where it was a Toys for Tots dance, so it was all Christmas themed, and we had all different callers, and somebody collapsed and really hurt themselves bad. The paramedics had to come in there and haul them away and everything, and so I was thinking of that, and it's like, yeah, don't call Grandma got run over by a reindeer. Bad idea.
Oh
True
dear.
enough.
But
I was calling in a synagogue once, and everybody was requesting gospel songs, including the rabbi. It was bizarre. Even the rabbi, he square danced with us as well, and he says, "Oh, can you do this?" And it was all gospel music. It was hilarious.
Yeah, I actually in my area, because we have a lot of people who might not be Christians. I avoid singing calls that are a lot of gospel tunes, mainly because I figure I can insult two groups at one time. I can upset the people who are not Christian because I'm kind of forcing something on them, or I can upset the people who are Christian who don't believe we should be dancing to that particular piece of music because dancing is right on the edge of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
So what I was going to say about things for bad events, I would advise people to go through their singing call lists as they have them right now and see if they have anything that would be a neutral song that they could have in preparation for, God forbid you should have one of these situations. You already have something in your playlist. If you don't have anything in your playlist, you might want to check on music to add something that could be done after an announcement that was very upsetting, that would be neutral, and add it in so that you've prepared for this in advance.
Yeah. Two that I have are the oh God, what the hell is the name of it now? I was right on the tip of my tongue. California Dreaming.
California Dreaming
is one. It's a popular song, but it's mellow. Another one is Neon Moon, which is a popular song, but it's mellow. They're pickup songs that people know and they enjoy, but they don't have any real connotation to it other than to let you relax back into the feeling. A question came up. Are you saying use each singing or each call each night The comment was that only works when you're starting out in this area, basic, mainstream, plus. It's just not feasible. I think that connotation was if you're teaching a class, you want to use everything that they've learned up to that point. As you get further and further past the basic into the mainstream, it doesn't feasible, but you use as much as you can.
But you try as hard as you can, and if you keep records, then the next time you're calling for the group, you can use the calls that you neglected, so that you don't go more than 2 or 3 dances without them hearing those calls, because you don't want them to maybe you've taught it, it hasn't really gotten into long-term memory, and now 3 weeks later you're calling it again and you're going, but I taught that to you, and all of a sudden you're putting the blame on the students, and you haven't repeated them, and so you haven't repeated the call, so they haven't had a chance to assimilate it. And to me, and I know that it becomes harder and harder to call, touch on every single call every single night of a lesson. But that's why I keep records and then make a list of the calls that I didn't use and put them up front for the next time. You're going to fail.
Yeah.
But you have to fail with a plan.
I keep a spreadsheet for a class of every week and every call, and so every time I use one of the at the end of the tip, check. Yeah, we got through all those, so that I know exactly how long it's been since they heard it.
And if you keep a spreadsheet, even if it's not the entire length of the class, if it's several weeks, you can see the gaps where you didn't call certain things.
There was a caller in Canada used to put the whiteboard up of all the calls that they had taught, and it was a tick box. It says, if I haven't called this at least once in 3 weeks, the first person up gets $10. That tells me. It keeps you honest, but it also gets them involved. You've clarified a lot of how teaching music is different than dancing music already. One question that came up in the chat that wasn't addressed was, when teaching, do you first say we're going to learn movement X, like we're going to learn box the nat, or do you show it and then say this movement is called box the nat? Which is your preference?
I think I decided a while ago that part of the reason people don't assimilate calls is we don't repeat them enough. We haven't given them the vocabulary enough. So I would now say we're going to be learning this call, and sometimes I would want the dancers to repeat the name of the call so that they would have said it to get a sense of it. And so I would err on the side of saying it in advance.
Yeah. It used to be an old teaching format when you were assessing teachers, and I know ECTA used to do this as well. When you were being assessed as a caller, you would have to get up and teach a movement, explain it, get the dancers through it, but you weren't allowed to use the name of the call, just so it would clarify that you were doing it. It was great when you were doing something like a fold or teaching a peel off, and the dancers would start thinking it was something else, and they'd say, oh, he's teaching this. Of course, it might not be what you were teaching, and then of course you fail because all the dancers are thinking you're trying to teach something else. I agree with you 100. I like to say the word, show the word, or say the word, show the movement, break it down into its parts, teach the movement, and then I'm always repeating it. Chris, you had something to add to that.
You're muted.
You're muted, Chris.
I was going to say that, like Betsy was saying, with the problem with follow your neighbor and spread kind of effect, is that one of the things that's can be confusing for especially newer dancers is understanding where a movement ends. So for that reason, if you use the do this, do that, oh, you've just done a blah, blah, that way of teaching it, you got to be really careful with that, because you got to make sure they know this part here, that was the call. So they don't use their imagination to try to guess where it actually, when was the call starting.
Yeah, it's important when you're teaching to say, okay, the call starts from this setup. This starts from a two-faced line. This finishes from the two-faced line. It will finish in blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So tell them that, hey, this was the start. This is the end. The other calls are not part of it.
Yeah. There was a lot of comments on sequence length. Short sequences are better. I agree. I don't think sequences should be any more than 12 to 15 movements at a max, but that's just my personal preference. That's just my personal preference. Brian made a comment, agree with Daryl. Dance. Our job as callers is to keep everybody dancing. I prefer to resolve as quickly as possible so everybody can get back to dancing. That's pretty much a summary of what most of the sentiment is on that. The floors, getting back. I'm just
I have something else about that.
And go ahead, Betsy.
When we're working and when we're doing the singing calls, I want people to succeed, and I will cheat if I have to get them back home, because that dancers want to finish the singing call with the partner they started with. And if they've done something creative and exciting, they know I'm doing this, but it still feels right to them, I will go 4 ladies promenade single file swing your very own original partner. If they don't have them all have it back, I'm going to give it to them no matter what. 4 ladies chain across, 4 ladies chain back to your original partner no matter how far it is. And I will give them the win by getting their partner back as much as possible. I also have enough experience that I have been able to develop some ways to standardize squares, so they've gotten themselves confused, and I can get them back into lines because I have 50 years of experience and I worked on taking care of this. That's not something that newer callers need to do yet, but make sure that if you can get out of the sequence quickly, and on a singing call, get them back to their original partner.
4 ladies chain, put the ladies centered back to back. Men promenade outside. Ladies, grab one of the men you like. That's when you get to find out who had a fight before they came to the dance.
Yep.
Yes, Chris. You're muted again.
Yeah, the caller giving up technique that Betsy's talking about. The dancers are very forgiving about that. They don't think anything really bad happened, and you're sort of subliminally teaching them that, hey, all right, so that one didn't work quite right, something went wrong, who cares, we're dancing. You get them right back into it, and it doesn't take much to be a little more elegant and a little more clever than and to dress up what is essentially the call, all right, everybody go back home. And if you're a newer caller, don't like just, I've seen new callers get up sometimes, and guest tips especially, and that sort of thing, and they'll get partway into a singing call or something, and they'll give up, and they'll like want to take the needle off the record, and it's like, oh, let me just start over. It's like, yeah, don't do that. I mean, if there's a more experienced caller there, and I'm sure there is, who's helping run the thing and getting you up and everything, then if they want to take the needle off and tell you to start over, that's one thing. But try not to do that. You can always just do something to get everybody back home, and don't forget that you can always just call 4 ladies chain 3/4. You can call it as many times as you want to reset things to where you want them to get back into it. There's always something you can do, and the dancers are going to completely forgive you, and generally they think it's maybe their fault, or it may be your fault, maybe you screwed something up, and they don't care, but they'll probably assume it's their fault, but they're very lighthearted about that sort of thing.
Somebody made a comment in the chat earlier. If you're calling, always accept the blame for the problem, because the dancers already know if they made a mistake, but you accepting the blame takes the onus of responsibility off them. They don't feel so bad about it, because I think you might have made one too. Yes, Betsy.
Yeah. My line for that is, it must have been something I said. Because if I did it wrong, then it's something I said. If I made a poor judgment choice and called something that they were not comfortable doing, it's still something I said.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're past the top of the hour. I want to say thank you very much to Betsy. Don't rush away. We're going to stick around a bit because there's still a few. I've got Ed Trevor's had his hand up there for a minute, and we'll get right back to Ed next. But Betsy, I want to say thank you very much again for coming in, and we do hope to have you back here some more. We plan on going on for as long as people want to keep on coming. Just a reminder to everybody, tomorrow is a time change in the US. There are a lot of things coming up. So for those of you that are international, members of Caller Lab, there's a couple of Caller Lab sessions and committee meetings coming up. There's a Caller Lab convention coming up in 2 weeks on Zoom. Just remember, there is a time change in the States tomorrow, so make sure you adjust your own clocks accordingly. And for these sessions, there will be no session for the next 2 weeks. Next weekend is my daughter's wedding, and my wife has already threatened that if I even go near a computer during the wedding to do square dancing on Zoom, it'll be a wedding funeral combined. But on the 28th of March is the Color Lab convention. That's going to be an all-day thing on Zoom. And then we'll be back here on the 4th of April with Mike Sikorsky talking about site calling versus site resolution, two completely different beasts, followed by Kip Garvey. I think Kip, you're with us here somewhere today.
He was.
Yeah, there he is. Kip will be with us talking again on applying technical zeros, transitions, and conversions. So Betsy, thank you very, very much. As always, a pleasure. If you could send me your slides, I can pass those over to Mark, and Mark is now absent from his desk, but Mark looks after our technical aspects of this, and we'll post all of these up on the Newbie Caller page and also on the OC Callers website. So thank you very, very much, Betsy. And let's continue. We'll go to Ed Trevor. You had your hand up earlier.
On the teaching aspect, and when you say what the move is, I have taught some things where I work parts of the calls before I say I'm going to be working on this. I don't know how appropriate that is. Say you're teaching a quarter through, you say everybody hinge, just to see everybody works the hinge, and then work in centers trade. And then say, okay, now we're going to learn the call quarter through.
Well, I think that sort of strategy is appropriate, just to work on the patterns so they feel familiar. If I'm teaching like basics, I start off, I get them into an 8 chain through position, and I'll have them pass through so they're in a trade by position. Now, I haven't taught trade by, and I'm not going to teach it for a while, but I'll have them pass through. The outsides wheel around while the centers pass through. Then everybody pass through, and the outsides California twirl while the centers pass through, just so they get the feeling of working. The centers are doing one thing and the outsides are doing the other thing prior to the weeks when I'm actually going to teach the trade by, so that you set up the physical movements so it feels similar. And I think that's a valid teaching preparation.
Absolutely. Yes, Chris.
The thing that I was trying to warn about is, let's say you had them. It doesn't even really matter what formation they're in, but you got them set up somehow, and you're thinking in your head, I'm going to teach slide through, and you say to them something like, okay, everybody pass through. Okay, now if you're a boy, turn to the right. If you're a girl, turn to the left. And then you say you've just done a slide through. The danger is that at the end of that, they don't know, was the pass through part of it or was just the turning. And so that's the kind of thing that you have to be careful of not confusing them on.
I noticed Guido put a comment in the chat, which is actually very valid. It goes into what you were saying earlier, Chris. Dancers are very, very forgiving. Guido was saying, if you haven't seen the chat or you're having trouble with your chat, because apparently a few people are, some dancers misinterpreted bend the line with tag the line, happened a couple of times. Very open and honest, said, okay, mistake, give me a chance to start over. They did, got him back for an encore. Dancers are very, very forgiving, but you have to warrant that forgiveness. If you're going to be I'm not going to use the term, but if you're not going to be the nicest caller in the world because you're technically correct and they're not, chances are they're not going to forgive you. Be honest, be open, be friendly, and be ready to modify, and the dancers will come to you all the time.
Oh, I would never blame the dancers really for just about anything, but the thing they're going to remember at the end of that tip is they're going to remember, oh yeah, something funny happened in the singing call, and maybe it was a little messed up for some reason, and they don't really even maybe know why or whose fault or anything, but they are going to remember this. At the end of the thing, we were all back dancing, and maybe we didn't get our partner at the end, not a big deal. Oh, he's a new guy, whatever. But they're going to remember at the end of that singing call, we were dancing. That's what they're going to remember.
True enough.
There are callers who preserve their egos at the expense of the dancers. And I think they find that some of the dancers aren't comfortable with that after a while.
They may be a phenomenal caller for the presentation for the big festival once or twice, but it does wear thin very, very quickly, especially once you get to know them if they're like that. Brian, did you have your hand up, or you just... Sorry, you're muted, Brian.
No, I think I was just scratching my eye, Mel, but I mean, we all make mistakes from time to time. But I sometimes, if I have another caller out on the floor, I will blame them for the mistake. I'll say that choreography came from Mel, and he assured me that was going to work. You know, and the dancers all know that that I'm joking, of course. And you wouldn't say it if you thought the dancers were going to take it for real. But
it would work in Canada because we drive on the other side of the road there.
Yes, you drive on the right side of the road over there, but we drive on the correct side here.
What was I going to say about? Oh, when something goes awry and you're trying to get the dancers relaxed, I find the comment like, somehow that wasn't how I planned it, goes over and gives a chuckle. It doesn't blame anybody, but it acknowledges that things are not quite where we hoped they would be. And if you can find a comment like that you're comfortable with, that you can acknowledge that the dancers have done something exceedingly creative and not what you planned. And dancers on my floor never make mistakes. However, some of them have been known to do very creative applications of my choreography.
Absolutely.
If you're going to be sarcastic, and I've been known to make some mildly sarcastic or, joking around kind of comments like that, I'm just going to tell you, be super, super careful with that, how you come across, because again, if the dancers think that you're being an a-hole, I mean, that's just really bad, and they'll never forgive you.
No,
I was trying not to go down that terminology, Chris.
It's a statement. It's a statement of fact. It wasn't a sarcastic thing. It was like, holy cow, that didn't go the way I planned.
I've heard a number of callers use the expression, well, that worked a lot better in my head than it did when I called it.
Yeah.
I mean, I say all those kinds of things too, and but I'm just saying, when you say them, you got to be careful, because I've seen people say them in a way that was not taken in the spirit with which it was given. And so especially if you have some people who are having a hard time and are very frustrated, they might so always be aware of almost anything you say can be taken the wrong way, so be careful with what you say.
You have to be ready to deflect it. Classic example, I had to go and buy a suit for my daughter's wedding last weekend, and I was picking out a tie to go with the suit, and my wife said, I have absolutely no taste. And I said, well, I picked you, so obviously I have good taste.
Wow.
She couldn't say a thing after that, and the sales lady looked at me and just, nope, not even worth it.
There you go.
Going back to making comments about things that you might have done wrong, I think it depends on the caller's personality. Some callers can say almost anything and get away with it, while other callers with a different personality cannot, and the dancers would take offense. I worked with a caller over here, and unfortunately he's not with us anymore, a lovely guy, but he used to say if things went wrong on the floor, he'd say to the dancers, what you did was really, really interesting, but what I had in mind was something totally different. Which I thought was quite a good comment to make.
Phil, were you raising your hand there? Phil Pierce? No? Okay. Sorry, go ahead. Bob?
Yeah, I just remember one instance where I picked a call because I have an advanced group and they like fancy new calls and whatever. And I picked one night And it turned out to be one of those regret that I have taught that call. It just didn't go over. But at the end of it, I said, hey, gang, we can all agree that call's not very good, right? Okay, let's move on. And just make light of it.
Yeah, I've
It's
heard a
not the
few
end of
callers
the world.
say.
It doesn't go.
Yeah, I've heard a few callers say when they have a bad mood, says, well, we taught that because it's on the teaching list, but we're going to leave that a while until we're ready for it or something like that.
Yeah.
Alan, were you
And
waving?
sometimes
Or?
that's all it is. They're not ready for it yet.
Yeah, don't hammer people with stuff.
Yeah.
They don't like
Right.
that. That doesn't work out well.
Are you waving to say something, Alan, or just flexing your pinky? You're muted.
I hadn't spoken either. No, I'm just being contemplating everything that everybody else is saying. There's a lot of wisdom dripping out here, and it's great if we could actually reproduce it. Yeah.
Very much so. John, Anthony, you had a comment.
Yeah, I did thank you for the information you sent me. You also during the week, I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I did a Zoom class for college students, and some were dancers and some weren't, and they were mostly in couples on each screen. So, and I had them going circle left, circle right, and such, and they started giggling and playing around and everything else. So what I had was a circle left, circle right, forward and back, Alaman left, turn through, forward and back. Well, after I did the third time, I did the Alaman left, turn through, Alaman left, and left do-si-do. And they all stopped and looked. And I said, see, you have to pay attention because you're doing a reverse do-si-do. So you're passing left shoulders instead of right shoulders. And right from there on, from the rest of the night, they just listened right to the calls and they picked them up great. It was just something that made them realize that, well, we got to listen. We just can't assume. Because he did it twice already, he was going to do it again. Same thing. So it worked out pretty good. Little trick.
It's actually a good comment. It's one of the things that happens in judgment, and I've seen this a lot. There was a time where callers would put in something that is a little bit tricky or a little bit something to make sure that the dancers listen, to force them to listen. They do swing through and boys trade, swing through and boys cross run. And they would do that just now. I'm just making sure you're listening. It's a great little trick once in a while, but unfortunately there's some callers that hammer it. And as somebody just finished saying, you should never hammer stuff like that because all that does is make you look like, as Chris says, one of those north ends of a southbound cow.
Right.
We've got Guido with his hand up and Bob Elling with his hand up. So Guido.
When you call as a new caller or as a caller not familiar with the club, you can get away with a lot more difficult choreography than the regular club caller because you have a different voice and dancers start to listen more carefully. You should not overdo it though. It's not an excuse to call difficult choreography because of that situation.
Absolutely. Bob?
Yeah, back to an earlier thing that Betsy talked about, programming a dance or writing a dance, how much time, someone said, how much time should you spend?
On programming.
Well, how much time it takes. But I was just looking down at my desk here. I called one mainstream tip on Zoom last week, and I probably prepared over 20 hours, and I could have called it instantly on the time. You know, I didn't need to do any preparation. But it's funny, you know, I had short parts that I did, short sequences. I had longer sequences, and I had long sequences that showed how to bail out if it's not going right. And, you know, put them in, but it was to create, I try to create different things. I just don't try to call calls. I try to design choreography so that it's musical, so that it flows, like ice skaters out on the rink. You know, they do things to music, and it just seems so natural. And I feel a square dance should try to achieve that, but that's just my own personal preference.
Absolutely.
And when you have choreography that flows well and doesn't overflow in body flow and stuff like that, you could do so much more choreography. You can take them to these newer heights. Another comment I was going to mention about, you have that couple that can't dance, that keeps breaking down the square. And I have the 2-for-1 policy. For the good dancers, I call this routine, full page. The second, then I do 2 short sequences that lets the bad dancers win twice. Then I go back and I call a long sequence for the good dancers. And yes, that couple breaks down. But the end of the tip is the short sequence that everybody wins. I had to do this recently at a national convention. I think it might have been North Carolina, I'm not sure. But the programming was horrible because they put a plus DVD session in the mainstream hall to start the day. Well, mainstream dancers showed up, and every caller preceding me had just dumbed it down for the worst dancers on the floor. And I think about those dancers who paid good money to come to that convention, that wanted a DVD session, that were not given anything. And that's when I do my 2-for-1 thing. I gave them a really interesting, and it just breaks the heck down out of everybody else. I let them do it. But then I called 2 sequences that were short, where everybody could win. And then I called an interesting thing for the others. So I got 3 good sections for the DVD dancers, which I think I owed to them. But I didn't need to cremate or just crucify the whole floor for the whole tip.
Yeah.
You know, let the other people win for a while and have a good time. Just thoughts.
Yeah, Betsy.
I had a thought. We're talking about programming and planning, and one of the things that you can plan for that might work is if you have that one couple that Bob mentioned that is breaking down the square, plan your choreography to move those 2 dancers away from each other. Because if they stay together, they can't be helped. But if you have, say, the ladies circulate, so they've got somebody different next to them, then the person next to them might be able to help them succeed. So that's a factor in planning choreography. If you run into that couple with that, and keep the sequence short, but move them away from each other.
Yeah. One of the things that I've
That's where
always
you
seen.
have that couple square.
Yeah. One of the things I've always
that couple
seen.
square through 4.
Sorry, Bob,
You end up on the other side.
Yeah. Broke up a bit on mine. One of the things that I've often seen is if you get a couple that's fairly weak, your dancers or your angels say, "Oh, we're going to break you up. We'll put you off to the side, or we'll make you a corner." And for goodness sakes, people, if you've got angels, tell them to stop breaking up bad couples.
I'll take care of it.
You know, put one couple in one square, one in another, because if, as Bob says, if they are, put them in the side couple position or the number 1 head couple position. As soon as you call head square through, they're with 3 other dancers. They're not dancing together. Don't break them up at the beginning. Keep them together at the beginning, because 90% of your dancing is with everybody else, not with your partner.
And I would like to point out I don't know how many people are aware, but having had larger classes and stuff, when you have that couple that can't dance and that consistently break down, if you walk the floor, the square next to them breaks down. Whichever square they're closest to, they send out these vibes or something that breaks other people down. We had a guy in one class, they called him the tree because he just grew roots and wouldn't move. That was it. But it was whatever square was adjacent to him broke down every time.
Yeah. Roz, you had a comment. You're muted.
Yeah,
There you are.
a number of years ago, we had Alan McCurr, who's with us today, come over to our little club, and we and we had a mixture of mainstream and a mixture of learners. And I was quite impressed what he did. He had the mainstreamers as heads and the learners as sides. So he gave the heads, the mainstreamers, a bit more harder choreography, and then the learners something easier. So you're actually dancing learners and mainstream in the same set. And I thought that was very good. Thank you, Alan.
Brian Hotchkiss made a comment here, which is an absolutely true comment. Everything that we call should have good body flow. Then even if it is an unexpected figure or an unexpected movement, your body will flow naturally into it. The dancers feel as if, yeah, that's what we should have done. Chances are you could call it a whoop-de-doo, and if the body flow is good, they're going to do exactly what you want because that's the natural thing to do. And I don't know if whoop-de-doo is a challenge call or not, but from a couple of grins, it probably is.
It's not any challenge call, but on the other hand, I'm sure you can find it in Burleson's, probably multiple definitions.
Probably. Yes, Bob.
Okay, Guido made a good comment about if you break couples up, move them into different squares. You got to be careful about doing that. That's a great idea, but break up the whole square. Just mix up the whole floor to get them to different ones so that they don't feel they're being targeted.
Yeah.
You know, they'll become self-conscious and not perform as well. But if you break up the whole square or the whole floor, that's fine. I usually do a side couples pass through promenade, do another square or something, or do a 4 ladies chain 3/4. Sides pass through promenade, do another square. And everybody's got a new partner and whatever. But don't isolate those people to break them up and move them around.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the reasons why I like using a Sicilian circle when I do my reviews at the beginning of the evening, because it's very easy once you get that circle going, you know, star through, veer to left, bend the line, pass through, whatever. Now you've broken them up and you're moving them not only to different people, but different directions. And yes, I know star through, veer left is not very nice choreography. I saw a couple eyes, but what?
Circles were fun when I had 8 squares, but when I only have 2 squares,
somebody had their hand up there. I did. Ed.
Yeah. I did have an instance when I'm at a lesson with a family of dancers, and they were broken up, and the girl just walked out because the scatter promenades, and there may be some comfort level in there that's something you also have to think about sometimes too if you call scatter promenades.
Guido mentioned something like that. There is a lot of cultural things that go in with that. I know when I started calling and dancing in Germany, there was no problem breaking dancers up, putting them in different squares. It's not such a big issue in places because they're there for the dance and they do all their socialization and dependency off the floor rather than on the floor. They're there to learn to dance. But in some places in the States, you're right, and a couple of people have mentioned that if you break up a couple and you make it obvious, they'll take great offense to it, and that may be the last time you'll ever see them. I had Alan, Betsy, seeing how you're the star of our show, and then we'll go to Alan.
Okay, what I was going to say is the only time I've broken up a couple deliberately is when they were seriously discussing things, otherwise known as fighting. And I have gone to them and said, look, for the next set or for that now, I would really like you to dance with somebody else because I want to save your relationship. And things are not going well with you dancing together. And I haven't done it from the stage. I've done it like in a break or something so that I can not offend them, but get them so they can concentrate. Because I think Guido put it in the chat about they'll be looking to see if their partner's making a mistake rather than doing their own part.
They're trying to dance somebody else's dance.
Yeah. So I've gone and I've said, look, for just this next set, I'd really like you to dance with somebody else so that we can make things work for you.
Yeah. I periodically say, everybody pick somebody you haven't danced with yet and get in a square with people you haven't danced with yet, which gets really challenging when you only have 3 squares. Alan.
I had something else to say, but just carrying on from what Betsy just said. Sometimes you have a dominant person in the couple and they are trying to control their partner, and so that is got to be handled, as you say, in a very diplomatic way. But I wanted to move back to the idea of how long do you spend planning, and I put it to the newer callers that I think I've found most of my creative choreography when I've been planning dances, and you're more focused on using a particular call, and you start varying about where can I use it and how can I use it, and moving dances around, and you often find that that's where you come up. Not only are you sort of preparing yourself of what might happen in a dance if you do move them around, but you're also coming up with other ways to use the call and maybe even create better choreography than you'd actually planned originally. So yeah, you might think it's a waste of time, but I think in the long run, over the years, it's an accumulation of knowledge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the mainstream dance I call that, I've been listening to them for 5 weeks, and like 99% of the time they say head square through and a do sa do. So I sat down and wrote my choreography, so I didn't call a single square through 4 to start anything. Not that I called anything hard, and I made uses of the partner line and different formations they never got into. Basically, I think I never heard much more than square through 4 do sa do touch a quarter. Then they'd call scoop back a couple of times, and then out of a scoop back they even called an Alaman left where I cringed, and then a promenade. But then I learned that in the Zoom sessions where people are dancing, especially if they have a square, they don't want to swing anybody else or make close contact except with their partner. So they use these, they use the same figure over and over again, which is okay, but if I have to use the same figure on one of these Zoom sessions where it's always going to be promenade your partner, and that's fine, I'm going to call heads, sides, middle break, heads, sides. I'm going to alternate heads and sides to give them some sense of variety. Just a thought.
Of course, if you really want to pass time in a Zoom session, especially with 2 couple or 1 couple Zoom, have them all stand in the head position and says, right, we're going to show you something. Sides, pass the ocean, swing through, spin the top, slide through. Got it?
There you go.
That'd just be a nasty.
But there's
a few people are going, what does that mean? What does that mean? Yeah, okay, it'll come to you.
They want a connection to the activity, and more people are learning how to dance Phantom.
Yeah.
Which is okay by me.
Yeah, I know one of the common things I hear call, and it's something that I picked up, is every now and then I'll do a tip and I'll go swing through, and the girls do this, and then girls run around a boy, and the girl walk and a boy slide over, and girl run around a boy, girls square through 3, girls pass the ocean, girls swing through, girls spin the top, girls step ahead, girls do a partner trade, swing your corner. Well done, boys. of course, the boys have just basically stood at home. And I get dirty
Well-
looks, but they all appreciate it.
One of my favorites for years, Tony and Jerry were going around the country, and their part of their shtick for that year, for 2 years in a row, was working box and add and roll, or do a left box and add and roll. So I go to my advanced club and I say, "You're gonna love this," and I do a whole tip with box and add or left box and add and roll, couples circulate or centers trade, and blah blah blah. And I got done with the tip, and I said, "Wasn't that great?" And they all went, "Huh?" Just as. So then I do the singing call, which I used head square through 4, swing through boy run, tag the line cloverly. Girls square through 3, do a left box and add and roll, then promenade. I've never heard a whole floor say wow at the same time like they did there. They were just so impressed with it. You know what they just did? A twirl. That's, you twirl the girl in promenade. So that's the left box and add and roll, promenade. And they enjoyed it. These are the people who wouldn't swing, who wouldn't twirl to save their life, but they love doing the left box and add and roll, promenade.
Yeah. It's one thing. Brian asked a question in the chat, and I think it's an excellent question. It's something, it's a whole thing for, especially for a new caller in a discussion. It's, why do callers call a do-si-do after a square through when the next call starts with a right hand? That is a whole long discussion in itself. It's one of those things in singing calls, the do-si-do is there predominantly for the timing or for the delivery, the mechanisms that go ahead, square through, do-si-do, and it goes in, it gives you a good feeder. But in patter, it's not always necessary to have that. It's not always necessary to have it in a singing call. A do-si-do is one of those things, do-si-do, step to a wave, or do-si-do to a wave. If your next call is ladies trade or a recycle or something that has to be from an ocean wave, where the facing couple rule doesn't apply. But it's like lines, go forward and back, right and left through. If it's a speech habit rather than a call there for a purpose, you're better off not using it. So break yourselves of those habits. Is that pretty much a summary of what you were getting at there, Brian? I'll take that wave as a yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, I hardly ever call do-si-do to an ocean wave. If I want to get them into an ocean wave in a zero box situation, I'll call heads right and left through, past the ocean, extend. And then you can use whatever it is that you're going to do from, that has to be done from an ocean wave, like a recycle or an all 8 circulate or single hinge or something like, well, not single hinge, but centers trade. I just get annoyed if I'm dancing and I'm constantly having to do a do-si-do after a square through when the next call is going to be right and left through or touch a quarter or swing through or spin the top. It just frustrates me.
Yeah, it was one of those topics that actually it's coming up. I've been trying to find somebody to actually talk about this. We have calling habits that are used quite extensively. One is, do-si-do to a wave. Forward and back is another one, but there's a whole series of these things that are just that. What happens next? What happens next? What happens next? And it might be worth plugging those things. So if anybody has any idea of calling sequences, calling habits, or things that are a bit irritating that happen all the time, a good example is you do a singing call that has a full promenade. And then you start the next call with heads promenade. That's perfect. There's no problem with that every now and then in an evening if you want that as your relaxing, mellowing out tip. But when you do a full promenade in a patter, and then you do a heads promenade in a patter, and then you do a promenade home followed by a promenade, out of your 7 phrases, you're doing basically 2 full sequences of nothing but promenades. So it's little things like that to keep. So if anybody's got any ideas or sequences of that, send them in to me in an email. We'll see if we can do a session about, okay, here's an issue or a perceived issue. Let's see what we can do with it. And we'll probably get Brian to talk on it. How's that sound, Brian?
Okay. Brian saying, I guess I'm not normal because I like to do do-sa-do step to a wave in the girls trade, or do a do-sa-do to a fan the top, which I find very comfortable flow in dancing. Uh, yeah, he's right. It doesn't have to start with the right hand every time.
Mhm.
You can do-sa-do to a wave and left swing through.
Yeah, I see your hand
That's
there,
also
Chris. Chris.
Yep, I was just going to say that I hardly ever call do-si-do, and when I do, it's because I want a particular effect, which is either the flow effect that Bob is talking about, or the musical effect to eat the time in a way that goes with the song, unlike a singing call. Um, and as far as the heads promenade forever problem, the that's just something for new callers to think about. Some of them uh, uh, don't know a very fundamental thing. If you were to say what's a head promenades do, they might not be able to tell you. Well, that's the same as a right and left through. And even if they think about it, then I mean, a trick for them early on would be to exercise that little tidbit, that equivalent for them to just see, okay, well, now that you know that, what could you do instead of the heads promenade that would still make things time out right in some scene call figure that you're working on? But I mean, that sort of goes back to the very, very basic knowledge of choreography.
Well, Guido made a comment in the chat, which is very poignant. For instance, if I take a singing call figure, head square through do-si-do, swing through, spin the top, pass through, bend the line, square through 3. Another one, head square through do-si-do, swing through, spin the top, right and left through, square through, but on the third hand, slide through, because these things are very, very common in singing calls on records, they become part. And for a long time, teaching new callers to call to get their rhythm was, okay, take the singing call out, or take your patter out of a singing call, look where it ends you. If it ends with a swing your corner that you can do an Allemande left, use that on your patter. And these habits have built up over a long time. Other habits that have built up over a long time are pass through, bend the line, go forward, up and back. That gives you a chance to look at the dancers. Well, that became a caller's habit rather than a useful tool. And this is how these kinds of things sort of developed. And we as experienced callers have never really taken the time to break these habits. We mention it, but we never actually take the time to break it, or say to a new caller if we're mentoring, right, I want you to do that sequence again, but this time don't use a do-si-do, or take the movement do-si-do right out of the equation and say, what can you do without do-si-do? What can you do without forward and back? What can and call that sequence. Put a do-si-do jar up, very much like a swear jar. You could probably pay. I kid you not. I think they should have that at every national convention, and any caller that calls a do-si-do, where unless it's absolutely needed, has to put a quarter or $1 into the do-si-do jar. You could pay for the convention.
I was thinking about swear jars about 45 minutes ago also, and so my thought is that yeah, swear jars is a great idea, but we're going to need about 50 or 60 of them in front of the caller to don't do this, don't do that. No, I did that again. Oh, damn it.
Yeah. But there's little things that twig, like Betsy said, if you're going to call with something, if you've got an unusual movement, so let's slip the clutch as an example, is something that's not really done much except from an Allemande formation. But a slip the clutch, head square through 4, swing through boys run, bend the line, right and left through Dixie style to an ocean wave. You're there, slip the clutch takes you to the opposite lady. So you could do a slip the clutch, Allemande left, get that forward motion to the Allemande left, come back and promenade. Those kinds of things are exactly what, well, I don't know if it's exactly, but it's in that kind of theme of what Betsy was saying. If you've got a movement that you want to use or focus or highlight, if that was the theme, was, we're doing a car theme tonight, so we're going to do a lot of slip the clutch and grind the gears, or exchange the gears, just call it spin chain and grind the gears for that night, or something like that. You can do a lot of that kind of stuff as long as it's right there at the end and it's not going to interfere with the dancers and they got the flow. That's a good way of theming and introducing at the same time. Betsy and then Bob.
Guido just put in the chat about a caller seminar done by a caller, and that night, and he's stressed. Don't start every sequence. Don't start every tip with head square through. And that night, guess what he did? Started every sequence with head square through. So
Yeah.
you need to be aware of what you're saying because it just gets to be a habit.
Yep.
What I've been known to do myself is go, okay, I'm tired of calling this. I am not going to do it. And I try and discipline myself to not start every sequence with heads lead right, heads square through, heads whatever, so that I can make the change.
Yeah, well, heads square through, four hands around, do side do to an ocean wave, heads promenade halfway, past the ocean extend, or heads right and left through, past the ocean extend. Your timing is the same. So find that. I think, Guido, you did an article on something alternatives to square through a while ago, didn't you? Yeah, it was
Yep.
published in Behind the Mic, and
Yep.
it was so many different variations of just square through.
And-
we had a session here on equivalence. Have a look at it. You don't have to change square through. You don't have to never use it. Just use other things as well.
It's about
Guido has
100
his hand up.
sequences I wrote and collected, and I only put those in there that do not have a square through variation in it. So if you take those where a half square through is in, you have many sequences, lots of variation to start a sequence without square through. And what I did, I ordered it by the current Call Lab teaching order. So even for a new caller who doesn't have many calls, there is lots of variety to get into a corner box.
Bob, you had your hand up?
Yeah, well, you were talking about the Dixie style slip the clutch. It just brought up one of my fondest memories. It was back in 1981, dancing to Earl Johnson from Southern California. And he got us into a partner line, and he did a right and a left through in the ladies' chain. And then he said, send them back Dixie style, make a two-hand Alaman thar, back up halfway around, slip the clutch, Alaman left. And I was wowed by that. I have not forgot it to this day. I shared it with another national caller who is on tour, traveling out of state, and he did that. And he said all the callers lined up at the stage after the tip. How did you do that? How did you do that? But it's just a wonderful thing if you want to use it. When you do the Dixie style, you say, now boys, change your hand to a forearm grip and back up. Take the girl with you. You got a two-hand thar. Back up halfway around. And dancers have no problem doing it, in my experience. Okay. And they get excited because it feels that's something like they have never heard, many of them.
Yeah, but it's something they've all done.
Yeah.
It's different, but still familiar.
Then I had to add to it, so I figured, oh, if you can do that, you can get into a corner line, do a right and left through ladies' chain, send it back Dixie style, halfway, or to an element, two-hand bar, back up halfway. Then you could do a shoot the star to a right and left grand. Bingo, another bang for your buck with the same sequence.
And that still goes into what Betsy said right at the beginning. There's your oddball movement, and it's right to a common, a known, or a get out where they have success. So even if they get it wrong, they're only a step away from the partner to do the right and left grand, or a step away from the corner. Even if they went the wrong way, they're only a step away to adjust and fix to get to the Alaman left with the right and left grand.
That brought up another thought. When I'm doing singing calls, a lot of times, everybody got out of the habit, or a lot of callers got out of the habit of using the same singing call figure 4 times in a row. So then they were changing them. I like to use perhaps 2 and 2. So the first half would be one singing call figure. The second half might be a different one. But if I'm only going to vary it once and make it a little more difficult, it'll be the last partner change. Because they're coming to their original partner. If they're in the vicinity and I say swing your original partner, even if they didn't get the exact sequence, they have success.
Yeah. I personally like the same figure 4 times. If I'm doing a workshop or if I'm doing something that has a degree of difficulty, like a left-handed relay the deucey, or you know, a boy girl recycle or something like that, I'll use the same figure. If I have pretty standard application, I may use 2 figures that have the same theme, like a spin the top here or a spin the top there, that kind of stuff. But that's really as much as I'll go. Yes, Bob.
I kind of use, I used to use change the figure 4 times. And then I will do that at the advanced level or above, you know, if I'm doing something, because they want the choreo. But if I'm doing plus and below, the singing call is to relax people, to enjoy, to let them celebrate your tricky choreography. It's not a way to extend so you can call more tricky choreography. And unfortunately, that's what it's become. People want it. They want all these fancy things. When I produce and sell singing calls, I almost always have a circle left or a grand square. Why? Because the singing call is to sell the song. It's not to sell the choreography. And there isn't, even the lowest of the beginner callers can call 4 ladies promenade, swing your partner, circle left, Alaman left, weave the ring. They can call any of these common singing call figures. I want to provide the people with the music and the song. Then if they want to go out and do their thing, fine, go ahead, call a 4 ladies chain, you know, or whatever to start it. But singing calls are for fun. So I'm a very strong proponent, plus and below, the singing call, repeat 4 times. Let the callers or dancers win.
I think let the dancers win should be the motto for everything we do. But that's just to me.
It's not just you. We agree. How about that? You had a hand up.
Yeah.
Was it John?
Sorry, go ahead, John.
With the square through 4, when they're brand new dancers, we've had so many problems with them going right hand, and when they do the left hand, they're ready to go outward rather than inward. So what I end up doing is I'll have them do a right and left grand, and then I'll recommend to a square of 4 and do a right and left grand and just keep making them pull tight, pull tighter. Okay, now do it and just make it turn each time. You just did a square through 4, and bingo, they have the hands down. It's just a little trick to make them know which hands are pulling and if they're going around in that circle the same way.
Well, John, one thing that I do on square through is I don't teach it from heads square through 4. I teach it from a double pass through, and it's the centers that are going to square through 4. That way, there after the first hand, they're automatically going to turn in because there's nobody on the outside, and it just makes the overall teaching experience easier.
Yeah, Brian, is that the Dixie style? Is that on the diagonal? Send them back on the diagonal for the Dixie style, or straight across for the Dixie style to the 2 hands are?
On the diagonal. On the diagonal. Yeah.
Just thought I would clarify that. Alan, you had your hand up, and then Chris.
I just wanted to talk a little bit. Now we're using symmetry more and converting a lot of our singing call figures to sort of left-hand arrangements. The classic error that we make with newer callers, they often call the singing call figure where they finish with a square through 3 to swing your corner. And of course, that's the complete wrong flow, really. You really need to do a left with your corner. So a good start is to do a left-hand turn your corner, but roll promenade. And if you think that idea works well, then you can use from left-handed waves. If you're changing your choreography completely, so you're working a whole lot of left, and left scoot backs into turn that corner left and roll promenade. So there's a whole way of using it and fixing what was basically a problem with right-handed choreography, where that singing call figure where they go to the right-hand side and come back to the center with a Ferris wheel and square through three. Just about every caller has made the mistake of calling that, and the flow is not good to the swinging corner.
Yeah. I like from the left-hand wave, boys facing out, girls facing in, is the walk and dodge, which takes you to a standard couple. The girls are walking across, and you follow that with a wheel around into the promenade. It'll work, one person does have to wheel a little bit more, but you wheel around into the promenade. There's lots of time to do it into that promenade, and it just flows really nice. The walk and dodge just feels that so much different because it's a left-hand dodge, it's a ladies walking, and it's almost impossible to go wrong with it. But then again, having said that, if you think it's almost impossible to go wrong, it's like having your dancers, it's like you pair up one couple, you've already got the square over 75% resolved just by pairing one couple. But I can guarantee you 75% of the time, you won't be able to call an Alaman left from whatever you set up, because it just never seems to work that way. Yeah. There's a lot of, we're talking about using the same figure. It was Jim Mayo at a dance, Al Brundage at a dance. Jim Mayo made a comment on this. He was calling a dance. He used the exact same figure 3 tips in a row. And he came up and Al Brundage came up and apologized. And nobody had even noticed. So it's a good thing to remember when you're talking about your choreography, because dancers, unless you're dancing challenge and there's a specific focus for the night and something like that, dancers very rarely remember the choreography. The only time they're going to remember it is if it's bad or if you screw up. Because if it flows nice and it dances well, because your patter is there, because the song is different, because the feel is different, if your programming has its highs and lows and everything else works well in the flow, you could call the same figure for 3 or 4 singing calls in a row, and chances are very few of the dancers would even notice it.
It was Jerry Story who said, if they're bored, change the music.
Yeah.
Not the figure.
Not the figure. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we seem to be running shy. Chris is waving. I don't know if he's saying goodbye or if he's got a comment to make.
Oh, just a quickie, just a little take-home exercise for the super newbies here on the subject of changing the figure on the singing call. Work out, with checkers or however. What happens if you change the figure where? For example, you could go head, sides, or you go, head, side, heads, or different combinations of who gets to do the figure. And so little take-home exercises to figure out what's the right answer for that. If you were going to change the figure, let's say you had 2 of them to make it reasonable. How would you order that? Anyway, just a little pop quiz for you.
Yes, Brian.
Just saying, I know the answer.
Right. Well, the floor is open if anybody has anything else. Betsy, once again, thank you very much. It is always a pleasure to have you back, and I hope to see you sometime again soon.
Yeah.
We plan on going on with these as long as people want to have them. But as once I said, we will not have these sessions now for 2 weeks. We'll be back on the 4th of April with Mike Sikorsky. Next week, there's no session, and the following week, of course, is the Color Lab convention. So if you are a member of Color Lab, by all means, tune in. If you're not a member of Color Lab, sign up, register, and join in, find out what it's about. Like I said, some people say Collar Lab does this. Some people say Collar Lab doesn't do this. Some people say Collar Lab is a group of old fogies that are American and they do it their way until they're too old to go. Other people say that, oh, Collar Lab sets the standard for everybody. And guess what? Everybody's right and everybody's wrong. And the only way to find out for sure is to join and participate. If you become a voice, you'll have a voice.
Yep. I'm going to go get some food, but I want to say enjoy yourself next week, Mel.
I fully intend to.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
I think my wife will be absolutely ecstatic because that's her only daughter. And when the wedding is over, it's going to be one of those, thank God that's over. We can get back to normal life.
Congratulations and thanks for having on once again, super presenter Betsy. Always nice.
Thank you, folks.
Betsy.
Thank you all for being here and all your comments.
I think, Betsy, you got to get yourself a cape and a little mask for the next time we have you, because it's Super Betsy.
Oh my gosh. At the women's dance today, they had a picture of Wonder Woman in different configurations. So if you consider I was there, I had a little cape for a while.
All right. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to discuss? There's a few things that are happening right now. Taminations has redone itself. Catch you later, Betsy. Thank you again. Taminations has had an upgrade. There's still a few things that are going to be happening. I sent an email to Brad. There's a couple of other things, and he's going to be making some more updates and changes to it. One, to put the counter back on and hopefully put the paste box back in so you can actually edit from the paste box rather than just pasting in the choreography. That's there. Anything else anybody want to bring up?
I had trouble using Tamination since the upgrade. I'd put about 3 moves in and then it would freeze.
If you were working on it this morning, I think it was doing a couple more updates, so it was sort of off and down. You couldn't actually enter the choreography in, but it is up and running now.
Okay, I think it was yesterday or last night.
Okay, so that's the new configuration at the moment, and you've got all of your status. This is in the sequencer. That's the way it looks. And you can set up all sorts of different things with it. And in the sequencer, if you have choreography, you notice the paste box doesn't come back. Whatever you have, your last copy on your computer is what will paste in the text box. Bob, you probably recognize that as lyrics from your song. But everything else still seems to work. So if you, let's just see.
Yeah, so I was trying, was it yesterday or today? Head square through 4 and touch a quarter, and it wouldn't let me do it. And I tried all 8, touch a quarter, wouldn't.
Okay, so that's essentially what will happen with it. If you do a paste, it'll just put the calls in sequence. Slide through, pass through.
Maybe I was trying to use it midway through the change.
Could be.
Same here. Same here.
I put this sequence up just for a point of discussion for new callers. One of the things about this sequence, if you're workshopping circulate and you want to demonstrate that a circulate is moved forward to the next position from facing dancers, a circulate is the same as a pass through. If you're in lines facing out, it's pretty much the same as a couples trade, only you pass shoulders. That would be the only time I would ever call that as a circulate, as if I was explaining that, because I personally think if you've got a movement, just because you can say it, why bother? At the end of this, after the cast off 3/4, it has all 8 circulate. Personally, I would just use a pass through. There's no need to confuse the dancers with technical wizardry and maybe give them something that they're a bit confused on. All 8 circulate instead of everybody pass through. Why would you? Except learning circulate. But that's just my opinion. Nobody comments? What was the issue you were having, Yolanda?
I was trying to do head square through 4, touch a quarter, because I was, head square through 4 in equivalence as far as I'm concerned, right?
Seems to work.
Okay. Seems to work now. Well, maybe it was upgrading. I was doing
Okay.
it.
It could be. One of the things that you have to look at, though, is if you've downloaded Taminations and you got it saved on your computer as a program that you're clicking an icon, instead of going to the web address and opening it up. So open it up off the Tam Twirlers website or Taminations and save that as a link in your favorites. That way you'll always get the latest version, because if you have one that's downloaded, it's like Colorama or something. If you have an older version downloaded and that's what you're using, it may not have the upgrades. And because it has to link back and forth, that could be one of the problems.
Well, I've got it on my favorite at the tool on the top,
Yeah.
right? The toolbar.
It's a live program, so use it live. The same as Colorama is a live program. When Reinhold is updating Colorama, he puts the updates. You'll get notification of an update. Just do the update automatically. It'll have all the bells and whistles and all the new features on it. It's a live, active program.
So how do you know when it's upgrading? Because it didn't say anything about it upgrading when I went on.
Taminations doesn't. Periodically, you may get an error and it'll come up with an error, say this site is under maintenance at the moment or something like that. But generally he does these very quickly at hours that are most convenient for most of the world. And there's really not much need, because he does all his research in the background. And then when he does the update, it's a matter of this happens now and it's done. So next time you go live on the website, you'll have the new version automatically.
Well, it was a good motivator to get my checkers and practice. And
that's always a good motivator.
And then
getting your checkers out is always a good motivator.
Yeah. Well, it ended up being a teach about checkers. I ended up phoning somebody and playing with my checkers and writing down how to. So,
Jeff, you're very quiet today.
Yeah, sorry, I went off air earlier. My computer decided to upgrade, so I disappeared for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But no, what I heard was very good. Thank you. And thanks to Betsy.
Oh, it's always good to have her.
My word.
So does anybody have anything else they'd like to discuss? If not, I'm sure my wife probably has some housework for me to do. Please, somebody have something.
Well, we can get the checkers out.
I have something Betsy mentioned in the very beginning of her presentation, to order music during a dance. Sometimes it freaks me out when callers have pieces of music where the lyrics don't match. Like, I make it extreme. The first one singing call tells him that the wife passed away, and the next singing calls is how they raise children with her. It should be the other way around. First you raise.
It all depends on how somebody writes the song, really. But I know what you mean. When a lot of times, if there's lyrics in a song, they put them out of the order to fit the lyric because it's an easier tagline to remember, and it doesn't match the original song.
I don't mean within a song. When you have two singing calls, put them in an order that fits the history.
Ah. I think you're getting a little detailed there in the programming, but I see your point.
You cannot do it with everything, but there is certainly a way when you can tell a story with the singing calls.
Well, it's kind of like a country and western song. If you play it backwards, you get your dog back, you get your truck back, you get your wife back, you get your house back.
Yeah.
You know, it's.
Yeah, but this is something when you have singing calls, look at the lyrics and put them in an order that fits.
Hmm.
If
You know,
that works.
I've never even considered that. I go the themes and the genre and the feel of the music, but I've never actually considered, okay, if this one says a story about a man and his dog, and this one's got the dog dies, and this one's about, you know, something else in the couple, and then later on you've got a dog that you're playing with. I've never even considered that. Thanks.
There you go. You learned something.
Yes, Roz.
We must be on the same wavelength. When we had the tape club, I did that a couple of times. Like I know I did Row, Row, Row the Boat, because that was romancing them, and then it was Making Love in the Country, and I can't remember what the third one was at the end. It might have been something about having children. So, but it actually followed through telling a story with each of the songs. So yeah, it's being a bit different. And I'll sometimes change the change the words of the songs, made up my own lyrics if it's a theme and I haven't got something to match it. So, but you've got to be careful you don't say the proper words when you're making it up.
Oh, I do that all the time. At least my wife says I do that. If I don't know something, I just make crap up anyway. So it's part of being a caller.
Anyway, thank you very much, Mel and everybody. I'm off, so have a good day.
You take care. I hope we all get back to dancing soon. And
bye, Ross.
Thank you much for coming in. Thanks to Mark, although he's absent. Thanks a lot, Mark, for looking after everything. And this session, Betsy will send me your notes, and we'll be posting it up on the website. Take care, all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see you in about 3 weeks.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Mel. Cheers.
Thank you,
I'll
Mel.
send you an invite, Yolanda.
Pardon me?
I'll send you an invite.
Okay.
I'll have a look at that song. Hopefully I'll get a chance to have a cut at it this week, Bob.
Yeah.
I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. Give me 2 or 3 minutes, okay?
Thank you.
Catch you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, all.
Bye.